Gaza is burning. Not just in the fire that lights up its sky at night, not just in the smoke that chokes the air when homes collapse into dust, but in the very soul of its people. For decades, Gaza has been more than a strip of land. It has been a symbol of survival, a place where hope collides with despair, and where every child grows up knowing displacement as an unchosen inheritance. This is not a conflict that started yesterday, nor a wound that will heal tomorrow. It is the unending story of exile, resistance, and a people's yearning for dignity in the face of relentless occupation and unimaginable suffering. And yet, despite the destruction, despite the silence of those who could intervene, the voices of Gaza still cry out. They ask the world, will you listen, or will you look away? Backhand index pointing right. Before we go deeper, tell me in the comments, when you hear the words, Gaza is burning, what is the first image that comes to your mind? To understand the pain of Gaza, you cannot only look at today's ruins. You must look back through history's fractured mirror. The story of Gaza is tied to the larger story of Palestine itself, a land once thriving with orchards, markets, families, and communities, where generations lived under the olive trees that symbolized peace. But history took a sharp turn in the mid-20th century. The creation of Israel in 1948 was not only a birth for one nation but a catastrophe, the Nakba, for another. Over 700,000 Palestinians were forced from their homes, many of them finding themselves in refugee camps that would soon harden into permanent prisons. Gaza became one of these holding places, swelling with displaced families who carried nothing but keys to homes they would never see again. And from that moment on, Gaza became a place of waiting, resisting, and suffering under the shadow of powers far greater than its borders. Decade after decade, Gaza has been described with the same words: overcrowded, blockaded, besieged. It is a narrow strip of land where nearly 2 million people live pressed together, denied the freedom to leave, denied the freedom to dream. Generations have been born behind these invisible walls, their lives dictated by forces beyond their control. Electricity comes and goes, clean water is scarce, and opportunities are rare. But the greatest wound is displacement itself, the knowledge that your family once had a village, a home, a history outside this prison-like strip, and yet you cannot return. Every bomb that falls on Gaza is not only an act of violence, it is a reminder that the world has normalized the suffering of Palestinians, that displacement is not temporary but woven into the very identity of Gaza's people. Backhand index pointing right. Let me ask you, if your family carried the keys to a home they were banned from entering, how long would you keep believing you might one day return? The world often sees Gaza only in moments of fire, when war erupts, when rockets fly, when airstrikes level neighborhoods. But for Palestinians in Gaza, displacement is not an event, it is a daily existence. Imagine waking up each morning with the fear that today your home might vanish. Imagine living in a place where borders are sealed, where movement is forbidden, where the sea is the only horizon but even the sea is not yours. This is Gaza's reality. Displacement here is not just about physical uprooting, it is about being denied the very human right to belong. The people of Gaza carry their history on their shoulders, they carry exile in their blood, and yet they raise their children to remember who they are. Despite the ruins, they teach them the names of lost villages, they teach them that dignity cannot be bombed into silence. What makes Gaza's suffering even more unbearable is how familiar it has become to the world. News headlines recycle the same words: conflict reignites, clashes erupt, ceasefire broken. But behind these sterile phrases are lives, families, and dreams. A father searching for his daughter under rubble, a mother holding the lifeless hand of her child, a young boy writing poems on the ruins of his home. Gaza's displacement is not a headline, it is an ongoing catastrophe. Yet much of the world has learned to look at it as background noise, a tragic but distant reality. But to the people of Gaza, every airstrike is a reminder that their displacement is not over, that their history is still being written in blood and tears. Backhand index pointing right. Do you believe the world has become numb to Gaza's suffering, or do you think people are just too afraid to speak the truth? But here is what the world often forgets: displacement does not only create victims, it also creates resilience. In Gaza, resilience is written on every wall, spoken in every protest, whispered in every prayer. Despite the hunger, despite the fear, despite the endless cycles of war, the people of Gaza still live. They still love. They still write songs, still paint murals, still plant seeds in the cracks of rubble. This is the unbreakable spirit of Palestine, the refusal to vanish, the refusal to accept that exile is permanent. Children play among ruins not because they are unaware of their tragedy, but because life insists on continuing. And in that simple act of survival, Gaza delivers a message to the world: you can destroy our homes, but you cannot destroy our existence. Yet the question remains, how long can a people endure displacement before the world finally hears their cry? Gaza's story is not just about bombs and blockades, it is about humanity itself. When we speak of Gaza, we are not only speaking about Palestinians, we are speaking about the conscience of the world. To look at Gaza is to look at ourselves and ask, what do we allow, what do we ignore, what do we normalize? The unending story of Gaza is not just theirs, it belongs to all of us, for it reveals who we are when confronted with suffering. Backhand index pointing right. Before we move deeper, I want you to comment, do you believe displacement can ever erase identity, or does it make identity stronger? When we talk about Gaza, we are not only talking about land under siege, we are talking about an open-air prison created by politics, justified by narratives, and maintained by silence. The blockade imposed for years has stripped Gaza of its basic lifelines. Medicine is rationed like treasure, electricity flickers like a weak heartbeat, and travel permits are handed out as if freedom were a privilege, not a right. Every border is sealed by power, every crossing gate is controlled, and every shipment of goods is filtered by outside hands deciding what a people can eat, drink, or build with. This is not merely governance, it is control over life itself. And displacement under such conditions is not just physical, it is psychological. It whispers to every child growing up in Gaza, you are not free, you are not wanted, you are a refugee in your own land. Backhand index pointing right. Let me ask you, if your life was confined by walls you didn't build, would you still dare to dream of freedom? Wars come to Gaza like seasons. Every few years, a new round of violence ignites, missiles rain down, neighborhoods are leveled, and then, when the dust settles, the world shifts its attention elsewhere. But for Gaza, war never truly ends. The rubble remains, the trauma lingers, and the children who survived carry the scars in silence. Psychologists describe a generation suffering from collective post-traumatic stress, where the sound of a door slamming is enough to trigger panic, where children draw tanks and drones instead of flowers and kites. This is displacement of the soul, when even in your own body, you no longer feel safe. The cycle of destruction and rebuilding has become routine, but with each war, the land shrinks, the hope thins, and the sense of abandonment deepens. Backhand index pointing right. Do you believe that children raised in constant wars come to Gaza like seasons? Every few years, a new round of violence ignites, missiles rain down, neighborhoods are leveled, and then, when the dust settles, the world shifts its attention elsewhere. But for Gaza, war never truly ends. The rubble remains, the trauma lingers, and the children who survived carry the scars in silence. Psychologists describe a generation suffering from collective post-traumatic stress, where the sound of a door slamming is enough to trigger panic, where children draw tanks and drones instead of flowers and kites. This is displacement of the soul, when even in your own body, you no longer feel safe. The cycle of destruction and rebuilding has become routine, but with each war, the land shrinks, the hope thins, and the sense of abandonment deepens. Backhand index pointing right. Do you believe that children raised in constant war can still find hope, or does endless trauma eventually crush even the strongest spirit? Global politics feeds this endless fire. Leaders make speeches about peace, resolutions are passed in chambers of power, but nothing changes for the people trapped inside Gaza. Each government calculates its alliances, its strategic interests, its public image, while Gaza bleeds in the background. The displacement of Palestinians has become a bargaining chip in international games, a story told when convenient, forgotten when inconvenient. And yet, the hypocrisy is clear. Those who speak of human rights on global stages often remain silent when Gaza's children are buried under rubble. The question must be asked, how many more generations must live and die in exile before the world decides that enough is enough? Backhand index pointing right. Tell me in refugee camps, in exile across the Middle East, in the diaspora spread across continents, Palestinians cling to memory as their shield. They teach their children the names of villages erased from maps. They preserve recipes, songs, and stories as acts of defiance. In Gaza, despite the endless bombardments, weddings still take place, music still echoes, and laughter still sneaks between the ruins. Displacement has stolen their land, but not their identity. The olive tree may be uprooted, but its roots live on in every Palestinian heart. And that is why the story continues, because memory itself has become resistance. Backhand index pointing right. Would you agree that memory is the strongest weapon of a displaced people? Share your thoughts below. The suffering of Gaza also reveals the failure of humanity's conscience. The images we see, of hospitals overwhelmed, of families sheltering in UN schools, of entire neighborhoods turned into dust, should shake the world to its core. But too often, these images fade into the background of daily news cycles. People scroll past them as if they were just another tragedy in a world full of tragedies. But for Gaza, this is not one tragedy, it is a permanent condition. And when humanity turns its face away, displacement becomes normalized. The people of Gaza are forced to carry a burden the world refuses to acknowledge, and in doing so, they remind us that the greatest danger is not violence itself, but indifference to violence. Backhand index pointing right. Comment for me, do you think indifference is more dangerous than injustice itself? And yet, even in this sea of suffering, there is something extraordinary. Gaza's people refuse to vanish. Children still chase footballs across rubble. Artists paint on broken walls. Teachers gather children in makeshift classrooms, writing lessons on salvaged wood. Poets write verses that the world might never. This is what displacement cannot destroy: the will to live, the will to resist, the will to remain human in the face of dehumanization. Gaza shows us that even when stripped of everything, a people can hold on to their humanity like a flame that refuses to go out. It is a reminder to all of us, the spirit is stronger than the prison. Backhand index pointing right. Do you believe resilience is enough to overcome oppression, or does the world have a duty to intervene? So as Gaza burns, the story of displacement continues to unfold, not as a past tragedy but as a living, breathing reality. This is not just a tale of politics or war, it is a human story, a test of our collective morality. Every demolished home is a question directed at humanity. Will you allow displacement to define an entire people's existence, or will you finally say enough? The world has failed Gaza for decades, but Gaza has not failed itself. It has endured, resisted, and survived. And that survival is a testament to a truth greater than any weapon or wall: that dignity cannot be erased. Backhand index pointing right. Before we step into the next chapter of this story, I want to hear from you. Do you believe the world will ever allow Palestinians to return home, or has the idea of return become only a dream? As the fires of Gaza burn, one truth becomes impossible to ignore: displacement is not only a condition of the past, it is the inheritance of every new Palestinian child. Imagine being born into a world where your first lullabies are sung under the sound of drones, where your first steps are taken on streets lined with rubble, and where your first words may include the name of a village you have never seen but are told belongs to you. This is the tragedy and the defiance of Gaza. Every new generation inherits both the wound and the weapon, the wound of exile and the weapon of memory. And so the story never ends, because each child grows up knowing they carry a history that was stolen from them. But from the ashes rises a question that demands an answer: will this story of displacement continue unchallenged, or will the world finally listen? The people of Gaza have shown us what resilience looks like, what dignity sounds like, what humanity means when everything else is stripped away. Now it is no longer their burden alone, it is ours. Because to ignore Gaza is to accept a world where exile is normal, where suffering is entertainment, and where silence is stronger than justice. But to stand with Gaza, even in voice, even in memory, even in solidarity, is to declare that displacement will not be the final word. The final word will be justice. The final word will be return. The final word will be freedom. Backhand index pointing right. So I ask you, if you were given the chance to write the ending of Gaza's story, would you write it as one of despair, or one of return and justice? Comment below, because your voice matters more than you realize.